All right. Thanks for joining everybody who's jumped in so far. We're probably going to wait until a couple minutes after the hour just to make sure we get everybody in that we can before we step into the webinar. But just wanted to let you know. So we'll give it a few more minutes just to make sure we have everybody, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, just a couple of minutes and we'll go ahead and get rolling. Okay, well, it's 2 minutes past the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in and get things started. Let me know if you guys aren't hearing anything. I think we should be good now, but I'm going to go ahead and share my camera as well so you can see me. Hi. So just to get things started, my name is Caleb. I'm a customer success manager here at Concord. Normally, these webinars are run by Blake for anybody who's joined some of our more recent ones. He happens to be a bit busy with another customer today, so I'm going to be jumping in to lead this one, but hopefully just as supportive and informative as the other ones. Today, we're going to talk about data extraction. And I've opened up the chat and the Q&A, so anybody can drop questions in as we go and as we start to talk about the different aspects of data extraction in Concord. So feel free to let me know if you do have questions as we start to step into it. If you have questions about other aspects of Concord, those are welcome as well. Although I may wait until the end of the webinar to take time to answer some of those, just to make sure that everybody, gets the clear answers they need to make sure they're using Concord to the best of their abilities. And so just to go ahead and get things started, as I mentioned, this is going to be about data extraction. But before we jump into that, I want to go ahead and just get the conversation going between everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and ask an icebreaker question just to kind of see where everyone's at. And what I want to ask is, what is your favorite drink to start the day with? I know coffee is probably going to be the most obvious one for most people, but I know tea is still pretty popular these days with other people. Some people just go with water. That's a good one as well. I'm a green tea person myself. I'm a bit of a hipster, although 50% of the time I'll just go straight for coffee because I need that coffee, that caffeine buzz, as many of you do as well. Surprising amount of amount of water's in here. That's good. Water's good. Water's a healthy one. You want to keep that going. A Mountain Dew. That's that's adventurous. I appreciate that one. Great. Strawberry lemonade. Also a good one. Unfortunately for your for your wallet there, as you mentioned, Emily. That's great. Starbucks Italian roast, very solid. I'm a bit of a coffee snob myself when I do have the time and the money to do so. Awesome. Mushroom coffee, that is a unique one. I've tried it a bit myself at some coffee shops. It's different. I do like it. It's just not something I see too often. Good on you for taking the plunge, it sounds like. Awesome. Great. Oh, and a protein shake in there. Always very good as well if you're going to get a morning workout in. That's a great option too. Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for jumping in, everybody. We can go ahead and get rolling then. As I mentioned, this is going to be about data extraction. And so to start the webinar off, we should probably ask the question, well, two questions, I should say. First off, what is data extraction, at least as it regards Concord? And what would it be utilized for? What would you want to extract data for? How could that data be used? And for the first question, I would say data extraction is essentially reporting. And we're going to talk a little bit about the reporting area within Concord. But one of the reasons why we wanted to do this as a webinar is because there are also a lot of areas within Concord you actually can pull reports for as well that are probably less well known. And there's little bits of information that you can tuck away into your contracts as well when you are creating them and going through the signing process that can then be utilized later in these types of reports or even pulled into another system. And when you have this data at your fingertips and you can pull it really quickly and access it really easily, you can do all kinds of things with it. You can start to analyze it in different ways and start to get a sense of how people are using your Concord account or just the system and how your company is getting a feel for it. You can pull it into different systems to start analyzing either directly within Excel with things like pivot charts and pivot tables. You can pull it into one that's not quite as popular probably, but even more powerful if you have the ability to do it, is to put it into something like an ERP or into Tableau and start to visualize that in other ways. There's all kinds of great things you can do with the data in Concord, as long as you know how to put it in where it needs to go and how to pull it out in the areas where it's going to be most easy to access. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and get started. And as I mentioned, feel free to throw any kind of questions in you have either in the chat or in the Q&A area. I do tend to get a bit excited when I start talking about these kinds of things. So if I am going a little too fast, feel free to let me know. But otherwise, we can go ahead and jump right in. So as you can see here, I've got my test account ready to go to start to pull some different information from different parts of the platform. Really briefly, we're going to talk about that reporting area, which most of you are probably familiar with just as a general access point in Concord. And the reporting function is accessible to every plan in Concord. Customized reporting is specific to the Pro and the Enterprise plans, or as they've been recently rebranded, the Business and the Enterprise plans. But these are a great way to at least get the process started when it comes to finding information in Concord. Most of these that you see here are ones that come out of the box that anybody can utilize. I've created a couple specific ones. As you can see, I didn't feel the need to put descriptions in because I was mostly testing. But you can pull some really great things just to see things like, in this case, like what was signed in the last 30 days, what was created in the last 30 days. And you can expand those windows or shrink them as well to get more specific windows. And then you can also export those if you want to at any time to pull very broad amounts of information on all of the documents you may have filtered down for within the actual reporting itself. If you have custom reporting, you can always go ahead, as I mentioned, and kind of start a new report and then start to throw in filters in the same way you would in the inbox and start to package your information or to parse your information into kind of smaller buckets as necessary based on things like stage and tags. You can see those here. And then once you have those things broken down more specifically, you can start to do things like go ahead and export that data as necessary, and it'll pull, I opened one on accident. You can export that to pull really broad reports with all the information from those contracts. And so as I mentioned, most people are probably familiar with that area. If not, it's something I definitely recommend playing around with when you get a chance. We are actually in the process of rethinking how we want this part of the platform to work. So we're going to start by adding a lot more filters in the near future and probably some more robust overhauls to it to allow for more detailed reporting as necessary. So let me know if you have any suggestions for that as well, because we're always looking for feedback as we kind of move into the next phase of our company. Let me know if there's any ideas you haven't particularly think would be helpful. I know automated ones are ones that have come up, things like that. But always looking at ways to make this stronger as we're preparing for that new launch. But more specifically for our purposes, we're going to start to poke around some of the other areas in the platform where you can actually pull reports as well. So in this case, we're going to start with the deadlines area, which is another pretty helpful one that people may not realize you can utilize for that purpose. You probably are aware of the deadlines area in Concord. It's not hidden or anything. Just a great place to pull up so you can actually start to look at the different contracts that you have with deadlines that are upcoming or in the past. But this also has a pretty solid filtering and reporting function as well if you wanted to utilize that. So here I am in the deadlines area, as you can probably see. I can go ahead and start to add different filters and things to kind of tailor what reports I'm seeing similar to the reporting area or the inbox, but they're a little more specific here. So I've got that tags area first off, where I can use to start adding tags and start to filter according to tags I have in my system. Most of you are probably familiar with tags. If you're not familiar, I highly recommend getting familiar and utilizing them as much as you can. They're one of my favorite features, just as a way to organize your documentation in other ways that you might not be able to with folders or separately from folders, and then being able to report and filter those later on in different ways, like in this particular webinar. But I have some set up based on contract value that's included, a couple of them attached to particular departments in my little test account, and even some that are attached to specific types of contracts. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. But more specifically for this particular deadline reporting area, I think deadline type is one that not too many people are familiar with, especially as regards to the contracts themselves and what you can do with them. So you can see there are a couple here. There's the life cycle, which is pretty straightforward and obvious. It's renewal details. Most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with that, if not all of you. But there's also financial information and main clause information that you can attach to contracts in Concord. And just from my conversations with my customers, I know this is something that's really underutilized and I think could really help a lot of people with the different ways they want to pull data and report on it. So you can actually add additional timeframes onto your contracts that are separate from the life cycle itself and then pull reports on those. And as you see in the financial section, you can even add dollar values to those as well. Like if there's a particular service that a contract is rendering that needs to be fulfilled within a certain time frame. The main clause one, like just by way of an example, so one of my customers is a media company, and they do a lot of contracts with different media producers of various kinds or different artists of various kinds. And separate from the main life cycle of the contract, but still included just as, but still important as part of it is like an NDA. An NDA that might last much longer than the length of the actual contract itself, but which still needs to be included. And brief note, yes, this recording will be available. We can send this out to anybody who has attended or maybe who registered but didn't get a chance to attend. That will be going out. Thanks for asking, Jennifer, so I can make note of that. So pass that aside. So like in the case of that NDA, they would add a special clause in the summary area of the contract that would stipulate that date and would say, okay, this NDA is going to last an additional 5 years. And once they put that information in, they can then pull reports that would indicate that information as well and everything around it, separate from the actual life cycle details. It's a really, really great way to attach different types of timeframes. So like looking at the ones I have here, I'm going to go ahead and pull up, let's look at a financial one that I have set up just for this example. And if I go ahead and I click into the actual contract itself, in the summary area, you can go ahead and make those adjustments and changes. Quick note here, my summary section looks a little differently because we're testing out a new format for it as part of the AI launch. So it's formatted a little differently. It's a bit more robust in terms of the data and the information. The section that I'm referring to specifically is one called the custom clause area, which normally would be at the very bottom of a contract. we've kind of adjusted and moved that to the center now and rebranded it as key terms, just so it's a bit more distinct of a name. The custom fields area for people who still use that will still be there as well. But the custom clauses is being rebranded as key terms in a release that's coming probably in about a month when the AI itself fully launches closer to mid-July. But I put that information here, you can see, and at any time I can also add more information and add a different clause. So like if I wanted to add that NDA information, say I want to do that here, and I want to say, just say like an additional NDA separate from the contract lifecycle. And if I go ahead and do that, I can then add a duration or frequency, and by that we just mean a time frame. So let's say that this is going to last, maybe it's going to last a certain period of, let's say this is going to be 5 years. Say the contract is only 2 years, but our NDA is 5 years. And if I want, you might not do this for an NDA, but you can add that financial amount as well to be paid or something that's going to be collected, just so you have an extra bit of information. And so if you're willing to do that in your contracts and you're willing to put that information in there and tuck it away, you can then start to pull it in those reporting areas that we're going to start talking about, starting with this deadline area. So when it comes to the deadlines, let's actually pull a report. Let's go ahead and actually do that so you can see what that's like. And with the deadlines, it's a bit more simplified just in terms of the basic information, like these specific reports, I mean. But I'm going to go ahead and export this one. And I'm going to pop it open so you can see what this looks like. And let me go ahead and make sure I'm sharing this version of my screen. Oh, no, got to go back to that report. Okay, let me pause this for a second. And let's just say, let's make sure I'm sharing my entire screen here. I'm going to pull up my Excel. I'm going to pause this for a second. And then I'm going to make sure that I am just sharing the desktop in general. Perfect. Okay. So what you pull with the deadline is going to be pretty straightforward. It's going to have just some basic information here, including the date that's included for that particular custom clause information or the lifecycle details, if that's what you want specifically, and then just other details included as part of that, and a link directly to it. So just a quick and easy way if you want to start to visualize the different deadline dates you have attached to your contracts in a way separate from the life cycles, if that's something you've taken the time to do as you've been going ahead and creating your different contracts. So something that can be really helpful. But another thing I think that's even more powerful and which people also don't always know is that you can actually pull reports directly from the inbox area and detail those in some really fun and intricate ways, depending on what you're trying to do. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my inbox. And for those who are familiar with the inbox, there's any number of filters that you can use to start to tailor around what you're looking to do and start to kind of parse for more specific buckets and selections of your contracts. In this case, I'm just going to use all of them because for my test, I only have about 50 in here anyway. But say I'm going to go ahead and pull a report and I want to look at something very particular for like a very particular segment of my contracts. I would go ahead and use those filters to filter for something very specific. I can even use filter by text if there's like a particular phrase or word in the contracts that I want to be able to parse for. And then from there, I'm going to go ahead and select all of them in this case. And if I go to actions, you can see that there's a button that says export lists. And what it's going to do is allow me to pull a report for all the information in those contracts. We have two options here. There's the simple report, which is going to pull the most basic information, most of what is included in the summary, just so you have a way to visualize that really quickly. And there's an advanced export, which is going to pull all kinds of additional information. It's going to pull really detailed information on those extra clauses I might have added. It's going to pull really detailed information on any lifecycle information that I might have added. Anything and everything that is included as part of this contract that isn't expressly stated in the text is going to be pullable by this contract or by these exports. So let's start with a simple export real quick, just to kind of show you what that looks like and show the difference. I'm going to do an Excel file. You can do a CSV if you want. But once I do that, it just takes a second to go ahead and process. And then I can download it. And once I pull that open, it's going to look just like this. So you should be seeing a pretty detailed report with a lot of basic information, as well as you can see a link here to the different contracts. The document ID which can be really helpful, especially for us for triaging purposes. If you ever have issues with a contract, feel free to share the ID with us so we can look on the back end, because for security purposes, we can't jump into your account. But we can't see some of this information if we use that ID to identify it in our database. But there's all kinds of information based on the different document statuses, who the guests are, what their emails might be as attached to the different contracts. And you can get a lot of robust information really quickly right here that you can then use to start to parse in different ways. And again, this is just the simple one. So it's just going to pull most of the basic information there. But let's say I want to start pulling information for maybe those detailed life cycles and maybe that more detailed information around things like the financial clauses or the custom clauses I might have added. So I'll go ahead and do that. And oh, hold on, we're getting a question. Is there any way to do a bulk upload of information using the export? That is, can we export a report, add information to it, and upload it to update the records? Ooh, that is a very clever usage of it. Not something that we can necessarily do right now, but I think something that we are potentially looking at being able to do in the future. I know more short term, we have that AI feature coming, kind of targeted for mid-July. It's going to be accessible by everybody, and it's going to give you a way to pull basic information from your contracts in a way that will autofill the summary for those who aren't aware. But soon after that, relatively quickly, we're going to allow it to do it with bulk uploads. So the bulk upload system we have in the platform is somewhat fun, somewhat rudimentary, as most of you are probably familiar with if you've tried to use it. But the AI feature will allow you to add all kinds of information like lifecycle details and tags and things to each individual contract that you upload in that way. So somewhat of a similar use case. As far as a way to make changes to that bulk upload and then import it back into the system, that's something I would definitely float with the product team. I think that could be really useful of a feature. It may be a bit tricky to build and may take some time to get around to, but that's definitely a really good one. Let me go ahead and make a note of that one, to export that, make changes, and then re-import, because that's good. And thanks for that one. I can make sure you guys are added on that feature request as well. So we have a bunch of different names on it to get some more traction on it. And we can kind of keep you posted in the future as we start to look at that. That sounds like a really good one. Yeah, and just a quick note while I'm at it, actually, and while we're kind of talking about this. So more recently, and by recently, I just mean this year, some of you may know that we've been trying to take a more customer-centric approach in terms of how we build out the platform, and we're really trying to prompt more of customer feedback in terms of how they use it and would like to use it, as opposed to just building it in the ways that we would like it or think it should be used. So if you ever have requests or feature requests or things like that, or that type of feedback, feel free to let us know on the customer success team, contact support, contact your individual CSMs, such as me, and let us know if you have those kinds of ideas. And there's a good question here. Is there a better way to sort out the information when I run this report? My Excel file goes out column BS. Yes, so that's another one. One of the things that we are also looking at in the future, although there's not a time frame for that, is eventually the ability to specifically I know in the reporting area, I'm not sure about the inbox area just yet, but I know eventually we do want the ability to let people specifically hand pick and choose the columns that you see and that you get pulled in the export, because you can obviously handpick those columns when you set up the report itself, but when you pull a report, it pulls all kinds of information, right? So something that is on the roadmap, although I can't confirm exactly when it would be inputted, but just part of the reporting overhaul we're looking at for longer term. And let me make sure I cover a couple more just before we go ahead and get started into here. Add files with a folder instead of adding a new document and having to search for the file. Let me think about that one and make sure I am reading that correctly. Actually, since we're running short on time, let me finish this really quick and talk about a couple more things with the reporting, and then I'll make sure I get to some of these questions. Thank you for this. This is all really great stuff. I just want to make sure we cover the stuff that we did have before we start to jump into some of this other stuff. So really quickly, so this advanced export, if I'm going to go ahead and do this, as June happened to mention, it is going to pull a lot of information, and that's something to be wary of. It's just going to be a question of, I think, knowing how to parse it. Like I said, eventually we do want to be able to tailor what is pulled in these reports, but for now, it's kind of an everything in the kitchen sink approach, depending on what you're trying to do. Um, so there's all kinds of information here. All the basic information that I mentioned, and that was in the previous report. But then if we start to pull it out a bit more, there's all kinds of information around some of those additional clauses I may have included. There's signature dates and effective dates and life cycle information. It goes pretty far out, renewal and termination information. There's financial information, all the detailed information you might have added to those custom clauses or those key terms so that it's kind of listed here. It is a lot, as she mentioned, and it can be a lot. We just ask for patience right now while we kind of continue to decide exactly how we're going to adjust that and when we're going to make that change to Concord. Again, no time frame for that, but I know it is something that we are working on at some point in the future. So we've got this huge contract, or we've got this huge report with all kinds of information. It can be a bit much when you're looking at it, but what we can do now that we have this, we can actually start to break down some of that information. So the second question I asked when we first started was, what do you do with the information, right? And there's a couple ways you can go about that. I think the most basic and easy one is just going to be crunching those numbers and that information within Excel itself, which is something most of you are probably familiar with as well. If you happen to play with data a lot, as I have known to in my just in my career. So in this case, we've got this particular report. Let's go ahead and start to pull a subsection of it really quickly. Because if we try to pull too much, it might not want to make me a pivot table. I was playing with that earlier. Some of the columns have similar titles, so you might need to adjust that if you want to do more with it. But for this case, I'm gonna go ahead and pull that subset. I'm gonna go ahead and let's pull up a pivot chart with that information. And maybe pivot charts are a bit rudimentary to some of you, but for people who aren't familiar with them, this is a really great way to start to just play around with that data in different ways. So let's say we want to say the document status is going to be one of our axes. We're going to have the actual document number in the values. If I can go ahead and pull that right in here. So count of ID. And then maybe in the legend, let's just say we want to see who created these. That way we can get a really quick breakdown of what all the different contract stages are and who happened to make them. Not as helpful in this specific instance because it's my demo account and I'm the one making all of these contracts. You can see I did make one with a test user at one point. But if you have a lot of people creating contracts, this can be really useful. You can see what's in everybody's bucket and what they happen to be working on as an admin. That's a really great use for it. If I want to, I can start to change that up in a couple different ways. Let's say I want to see when these contracts were created or when they were last modified. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to this legend as well, and we can start to break that down even further. And you can even start to break that down into quarters, into months, and you can really start to visualize just via a chart who is making these contracts, when they were made or modified, and you can start to just access your data in a more detailed way. For those of you who are much more detailed in your analytics and are much more number heavy and experienced with this kind of stuff, that's where something like Tableau or Gantt or an ERP would come in for even more detailed number crunching. So if you have that financial data and that custom clause data that I kind of mentioned earlier, and you start to utilize that really effectively and start to add that to as many contracts as you can, when you do have reports like this and you start to pull these full exports with all this data, you can then use that to do things like set aside budget for the different contracts that you have in the system. You can set up some detailed forecasting. You can use it for mitigating risk just based around the different finances you have assigned for different things and the different timeframes that are allotted for those. There's a lot you can do with it. There is a lot of information there, as I mentioned. But if you have the know-how to just kind of start to crunch it together, you can start to do some great things with it. And so before we do go today, I want to go ahead and make sure that I cover some of those questions that may have been thrown in there that I had not gotten to. So let me make sure that we are talking about some of this. Starting with, let's see. Yes, so it would be great if you could add files within a folder instead of adding a new document and having to search for the file. So let me make sure that I am understanding this particular one as far as how I am reading it. search for the file. Oh, so like add the document directly into the folder itself as opposed to saying new document and then choosing the folder that you want it to go in, I think, if I'm reading that. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so in that case, I know you can obviously assign a folder when you're creating the document and when you're adjusting it, something that other people have requested and that I know I've pushed to the product team as a way to drag and drop stuff directly in there. I'm not sure if that's super easy for them to build. I do think that we are potentially looking in the future at a solution that would be something like assigning a particular folder to a particular document when it comes in. I think AI is really going to help with that because I know eventually, not sure on a time frame for this, but eventually when we continue to build it out, we're going to do things like make it so that it will suggest a folder for you for where you want to put a document when you've created a new one. So not quite as seamless as just kind of throwing a document in there as I think you're thinking, but I think we are going to slowly get closer to that, if not all the way there. And we're just continuing to think of ways to make that easier and make that process more streamlined. So very good question. I think we're on the same page as far as where we're going, although, like I said, it might take a little longer to get exactly where you would want to be. When we start making actual contracts and get stuck up, how to get from your side. How to get assistance from our side, I think is the question, if I'm reading that right, from Nishikant. I hope I'm saying that right. Support at Concord.app is a great place for that. You can reach out to your individual CSMs if you happen to know who they are. Like if for people who are my customers, Caleb.Medell at Concord.app is great. But I think support is the best way just to get information really quickly and get support really quickly. And then they can always funnel it to us. Our support person, Tori, can always funnel it to us if it's something bigger that we need to step into or needs to be escalated. Yeah, okay, and then you clarified it down there. Great. How did this report get formatted to add color groupings? Does the system do this automatically? I may have missed this if you already covered. Yes, Jennifer, I'm not sure if you're responding to me answering your question or to this particular comment, but yes, so those colors do get automatically, it breaks it out automatically into those different subsections. The system is designed to do that just to make it more visually appealing when you do have that information, because again, there's a lot of it. And something we may potentially add features to adjust in the future, since I mentioned we are looking at a way to adjust the columns at some point in the future, not sure when, but also just a very good question. Yeah, it'll do that for you, so no need to worry there. I'm just new to these. Is there an app or link for this for us to use? Like an app for Excel sheets. So I think Excel probably answers the question, but you can also use Google Sheets if you don't want to pay for Microsoft Word. I've used the Google Sheets pretty extensively as well myself. As far as I know, they're pretty one-to-one as far as the feature sets and how you can analyze data. They just happen to put things in different places. So it can be a bit jarring to move from one to the other because things are assigned and organized differently. But if you take one of these sheets and you upload it directly into Google Sheets on if you have a Gmail account, you can pop that open in the Google Apps area. That's a great way to access this without having to go through the whole Microsoft Excel approach. Since we're taking requests to the product team, we'd like the linking feature to be more active. For example, when an amendment is linked to amends a previous version with an extension of the contract end date, the previous contract end date is no longer active, so that document does not show up in deadline reports for lifecycle since the new date is now the end date. Right now, both documents show up as coming to the end at different dates. Ooh, that's a good one. I definitely feel like I have heard that before. But let me make a note of that so I can double check and make sure that that is something that they are aware of. I know a more streamlined renewal process as far as how the data is viewed and how connected those contracts are in a more continuous streamline would definitely be helpful. Let me go ahead and make a note of that so that I can push that to them if it's not something that is on their minds already. Okay, cool. And then I think we just got a question in the Q&A, so we can go ahead and close out with that. Let's see. It says, is there a mobile app in the works? The website is not mobile phone friendly. Also a good question. So I think we are continuing to, just as part of just general upgrades we have been making to the platform and will continue to make over the next couple of years as we get more in line with our, customer requests and what our customers like to see in the platform. That is definitely something I've heard about from a couple people recently. And I think we are potentially looking, or not potentially, I would say, I think we are eventually looking at ways to try to make that easier. I know it does have full functionality when you pull it up in a browser. That's obviously not necessarily the easiest because then you have this whole page thing kind of open in your browser, but you can zoom in and out. It does have full functionality right now, but maybe not in a way that is easiest. So I can't say that we will necessarily make an app, but I do want to say that in the longer term, we are listening to people who want a more streamlined mobile experience. So that is something that we are kind of taking information for. As with a couple of the things that I mentioned here, I don't have a time frame for that or a confirmation on when that might come through or when we would kind of push those kinds of updates, but I know it is a conversation that is being had. So again, let us know anything you have as far as requests for that kind of thing. And I'll make a note for that, just mobile accessibility, I think, just so that that is something that we have people attached to. Okay. And if there are no other questions, I think that is going to be the end of this. But before I go, let me go ahead and make sure that I pull in a meeting link here. So if you do have any other questions or anything about just the platform itself and about the data parts, where is my Zoom? Let's get back to this. Yes, so if you do have any further questions or anything, another great place to go if maybe you want to look at the custom reporting or other feature sets that might be included in higher plans or tiers, or you just have more questions about this, this is another great place to go. I'm putting a link right here that you can use to put time on the calendar of some of the people on our team so you can start to ask some of those questions. Feel free to use that as necessary. And with that, my name is Caleb. Again, you can reach out to your CSMs at any time if you do have questions. And can we see upcoming sessions? I can make sure I make a note about that to be sure that that's included. I think we are still defining some of the content in some of these upcoming webinar sessions, but we should be sending out invitations for those as well as that starts to get finalized. So you should be seeing that. I don't know if we have a page just yet, but let me ask our marketing people actually. Got your name down, Damaris. I hope I'm saying that right. And I will try to get back to you with some information as soon as I have it. We get 200 emails a day. Same. I hear you. Yeah, anything we can do to make that easier, I will see what we can do. But thank you, everyone. Again, my name is Caleb. You can reach me at caleb.manel@concord.app if you are one of my customers. If not, I can point you to your CSM if for whatever reason you aren't in contact with them. But again, you can always go to support as well. That may be the fastest way to get really quick. Just support for general things, support@concord.app. And with that, thanks, everybody. We will be in touch and let us know if you need anything else. Otherwise, this recording will be going out to people who attended or who signed up and didn't get a chance to. And be chatting with you all soon. Thanks, everybody.